We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no fluff email that boils down our three biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today again by Beau Brooks. He is the SVP of Sales and Customer Experience at Formstack. Beau, how are you doing today, man?
I am wonderful, Logan. Great to chat with you again.
Hey, always a fun conversation. Great to have you on the podcast again. Last time we were talking about some effective strategies for running a remote team, especially a remote sales team. For anybody who didn't catch that episode, I highly recommend you go back and check that out. We'll link to that previous episode in the show notes. But Beau, great to have you on the show again, man. For people who don't know you as well as I do, tell us a little bit about your background in sales and a little bit about what you and the Formstack team are up to these days.
Absolutely. Kind of a circuitous route. I started my career selling long-range Learjet medical transport flights. Not a SaaS product, but have pivoted that way throughout my career. Did some work in customer experience as well, managed customer retention at Dish Network, and then moved back into sales and customer experience at a product called Signpost, and now at Formstack. A lot of exciting things happening for us at Formstack. We're actually building out this really exciting technology that empowers businesses to capture, route, and store data in some pretty revolutionary ways that have never been possible before. We're buying a lot of new products and adding a lot of features. So it's a fun time to be at Formstack.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Fun time to be in helping people move data around. We're swimming in information and data, but we need a way to properly route it and be able to analyze it. So you guys are doing things across all sorts of functions of businesses, stuff that I love as self-proclaimed productivity nerd at times. So I love it, man.
Well, you said it really well. So you might have a career somewhere else if things don't work out.
Oh, man. Awesome. Well, Beau, let's jump into a topic I know you're passionate about. I've got some thoughts on. I don't know if there's a clear-cut answer, but it's a controversial topic. And therefore, I think it's a good conversation worth having. So we're going to be talking about, one thing that you mentioned to me that may actually be the biggest problem in SaaS sales today, and that is the lack of prospecting that happens at the account executive level or within that role. Can you tell me a little bit about where do you see this as a problem? What are your thoughts on it? Is it a big problem?
Sure. There's been a strong evolution of this topic over probably the last 10 years, at least that I've seen in the SaaS sales space in particular. And it has paired with sort of the growth of the SDR role, sales development representative role, which is traditionally focused on outbound cold calling and prospecting work to generate new opportunities. It's kind of built out this niche industry for training and development around that role. And some of these folks, these organizations that have built that have really pushed this message that account executives should focus specifically on selling and closing deals and not doing anything around prospecting and allow that function to be handled purely by the SDRs. I think that's creating a problem in the sales space, sort of an entitlement, if you will, for the account executive role. I remember back when I was selling air ambulance, it was similar. It was a service. It was non-SaaS, non-recurring. But the folks that were working around me sort of got out of the habit and were not pushed by the manager to go out and do outbound prospecting. And I remember very clearly, this was back in the days when I would basically grab the yellow pages of hospital phone book flip it open, it probably had 1,000 pages in it, and I'd call case managers all over the country trying to sell air ambulance flights, which is a real hard thing to do on demand. But I was getting my name out there and making connections with people that didn't want to talk to me, very similar to an SDR role today. And kind of the rest of the account executives and sales folks were laughing at me for putting in this work that they weren't doing, until I started to get calls back and were generating opportunities because these people remembered me and was all of a sudden closing these deals. And they didn't seem to be so happy at that point, but it created this, I remember very vividly, bad habit within the team. And I see that pattern happening all over again. Unfortunately, it's actually being perpetuated by some of the quote unquote thought leaders in the space. It's sad, not only because it's creating laziness within the account executive group, but it's removing some of the sharpness, some of the edge that they need in the sales process, staying connected to the early buyer experience in that ideal customer profile that they may or may not be selling into, to understand what does that early buyer lifecycle look like? Where are they at? Where are they living? What's their mindset like, to stay strong and fresh with those topics? And oftentimes organizations will pair up an SDR and account executive to work together. And if that AE's not been doing some prospecting on their own, they're going to get stale on some of the real-time coaching that they're giving with that SDR. So it's a challenge, and it continues to get a bit worse, in my opinion, as the months roll on.
Mm-hmm. Do you see, you mentioned kind of getting stale, getting disconnected from that customer experience. Do you feel like, then AEs can almost get robotic in their, this is our sales methodology, this is what I take through from demo to negotiation to close, and they're almost losing sight of those initial understanding of the buyer journey, the problems that they're solving, the experiences that they're having, because those conversations are happening, on a different call?
Without a doubt. I think the great salespeople out there, the great account executives, have a unique skill to take somebody who is still maybe unformed, or it's kind of like a piece of clay. They don't exactly know where they need to go as far as a product solution, but there's something there. And by being involved in that early stage of the conversation, they can help develop that. And as Steve Jobs would famously say, if we built products based on what customers need all the time, we'd be building a bunch of things they don't need in the future, versus having the vision to work with these people and mold that clay into something that's going to fit their product they didn't even know they needed. But I've seen this pattern where our AEs in general are building an expectation of what a customer should look like when they receive that opportunity in the sales process from the lead gen group. And the farther along that they have in their mind that this customer should be by the time it gets to them, the more poor expectations they carry through the sales process, right? If an SDR is going to move something quicker because they think there's a lot of potential there, but it may not look quite as refined as some of the other opportunities they've passed, an AE might be very quick to disqualify or push it down out of the sales funnel because it doesn't look like this pre-molded piece of clay that they've kind of been expecting, if that makes sense. So staying fresh, staying early on in the sales cycle brings a lot of value to that AE taking something and molding it throughout the process versus an expectation of what it should look like by the time they get it.
So that makes sense, Beau, where you're talking about the problem that it's creating. I guess one of the things that people are probably thinking is, this SDR AE model has really kind of developed, especially in SaaS sales, to create more specialization and a more efficient sales process. So what do you say to folks that say, well, if you push back on that, then you're losing that efficiency? How do you balance this, keeping AEs sharp throughout the sales process and the ability to cast a vision and not just work a fully formed lead, with the efficiency that does come from that two-part sales process between sales development and sales?
Sure. And I think that is a common misconception out there. And there's some judgments that are made along the way in that conversation that I think put us in a precarious situation. One generally being the successful SDR program. It generally occurs when it's paired nicely with an account executive. You have a team that's generally either focused on a vertical or a geography, but they have a very common go-to-market around their product. That is very contingent oftentimes on a sales development rep who is probably earlier on in their sales career, don't have as much knowledge, understanding, or history as the account executive does in that vertical. And we also, or geography, we also know that things can change within the industry that you may be selling into over time, that an SDR is likely going to be slower to pick up than an account executive. So in order for that pairing to work very successfully and for them to stay sharp in those areas, it's imperative that the AE is spending time in the market as well, because it's a symbiotic relationship, right? The SDR needs to be generating solid opportunities that are well qualified based on the qualification measures that the organization uses, and primed for a deeper conversation with the account executive. If those things are becoming a challenge because things are changing in the industry or within the organizations that you may be prospecting into, and the SDR maybe is not advanced enough in their sales career to understand those or recognize that it's happening, and an AE is not also having some of those conversations to help diagnose what may be going on, you run into challenges and things slow down, and an animosity starts to build between those two sides of the sales team that can create a toxic situation where fingers are being pointed and there's blame assigned. Whereas if the AE is spending some time, generally a part of their quota is carved out for a self-prospecting aspect, there's the ability there to stay fresh, to recognize trends, and to, as I mentioned, that symbiotic relationship, to spend time working directly with that SDR or that set team of SDRs on what am I hearing? What are the things that are working? What is the customer resonating with that maybe is a new pattern, and getting some of those folks to model that same behavior, to use those sales talking points that are working now, and really share tricks of the trade. Right. Versus relying on the SDR to kind of do that all on their own. We're missing out on a lot of inherent knowledge out there that we had never thought to be looking for. I think we miss a lot by saying, you know what, you just focus on the front end, you just focus on the back end, and let's just go to work and make that happen. I think we miss a lot in sort of the partnering. Think about I mean, even like a good volleyball team, right? In volleyball, you rotate positions and you're moving around on the court, or tennis. Different people play different roles, but you're moving around on the court and taking on different responsibilities. So you need to stay sharp and well versed in multiple areas of your game, not just that big overhead spike or something like that. You need to know how to set all the different movements on the field, and I think that applies extremely well in the sales arena.
I'm a sucker for a good sports analogy. So I love what you're saying there, Beau. I want to ask a question about, how you, and specifically, leading a sales team at Formstack and having done it in prior situations. I want to get to how you create this culture and the right incentives to push the entire sales org to always be prospecting. But you touched on something there that I want to camp on a little bit before we move to that. And tell us a little bit more about how you structure this symbiotic relationship, this back and forth, the cross-pollination of ideas between SDRs and AEs as they kind of build the shared knowledge that can't remain static. Because you make a good point, no matter what market you serve, things are changing. So how do you create this environment where iron sharpens iron back and forth between sales and sales development? I would love to hear some of the strategies or specific tactics you guys use to create that environment.
Sure. The concept of sort of sales quota setting, sales goals, fortunately for me, is a bit of a math problem. We can use some common statistics like what's our average price point, what's our close rate, and how many opportunities are we generating across the different lead sources on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, annually basis, and kind of do some math as to how's that going to work out. Now, I've taken an approach where we will set up the quoting system for an account executive that's based on leads coming from inbound through the marketing funnel, coming from the SDRs, and some self-prospecting. And it's set to where there's a percentage applied to each one of those channels. I know the average price point that those deals are going to bring in, and I know that what the close rate is on those things coming in. So I can set targets based on hitting on those percentages. Now, you may have some great sales reps that are awesome at driving price up. They may need to do less self-prospecting because on the things that they're receiving, if they can sell those at a higher price, they're gonna get the quota on a different path. Versus somebody that maybe doesn't do as well on maintaining price integrity, they may have to do more prospecting to generate more opportunities on a quarterly basis to cover that gap. So it is a bit of a math problem, and it's unique across account executives. But I prefer to set up a system where a part of that quota at any given time in a quarter is dependent on doing some outbound prospecting work, generating some of your own opportunities. And oftentimes, if you live in a sales environment where you are still keeping sort of an account management perspective on accounts that you've sold.
Mhm.
Some of that outbounding can be in an expansion capacity as well, right? Finding ways to grow existing accounts that didn't start out as large, but there's a prospecting component to that as well.
Yep.
That we keep open as an opportunity. So that's the way that I've approached it, to create some incentive behind the need for people to go out and do it. And the beauty within an account executive prospecting is they have the ability to do it in an area where they've got specialized knowledge. If you've worked in the software industry for quite a while and you know that space, there are companies where we would have an account executive who's knowledgeable there go prospect. If you've worked in oil and gas, there's the ability then to go prospect into organizations like that, where you're going to have a competitive advantage. So if you need to do some of the more challenging work on a limited basis, let's apply it to a place where you've got some passion or some knowledge and experience, and you leverage that competitive advantage to make it fresh, make it fun, and give people a challenge within their space. Where I have seen this be a struggle and where AEs lose some of their motivation is when it's having to prospect into something that they're not passionate about or they don't have a good understanding around. They either close that gap or they get frustrated and disconnected from the job. So it's definitely a deliberate approach. It's science in between motivation and finding the right niche or market to prospect into with your account executives to make them successful. And you have to be deliberate about it.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you said there, obviously, if you want to see results, if you want to see activity, then there's no better way to incentivize that than have it in the comp plan and in quota attainment. So, there's step one, to look at prospecting not only for new accounts, but in expansion within existing accounts, because that's probably a key area where AEs are missing added opportunities. And if that counts towards that prospecting self-sourced quota, then I imagine that is a great first step for AEs. And then if you kind of point them in the direction of, their specialty, the type of accounts that they've done a great job of closing, and they have, even deeper knowledge than they do generally about the industry or the buyer persona that you're selling to, then you set them up for success and give them some opportunities to have some more accelerated wins that come from those self-sourced opportunities. So I love the way that you break that down. Hey guys, chances are you're running SEO, PPC, social, email, and other digital channels. So why aren't we spending the same time and attention on our highest converting channel, referrals? We all say we value word of mouth because we know it brings our best leads that end up being our best customers. But most of us aren't using referrals as an active marketing channel. Enter the definitive guide to referral marketing from our friends over at Ambassador. To get your free copy, head over to getambassador.com/growth. You'll learn best practices, tips, and strategies to generate positive and organic word of mouth by building your own scalable referral program. Learn from the world's leading referral company, Ambassador, trusted by leading marketers at HubSpot, Zillow, and Gong.io to build and scale their word of mouth programs. Again, go get your free copy of the definitive guide to referral marketing at getambassador.com/growth. And if you want to talk to their experts there, just drop them a note. All right, let's get back into the show. How do you guys kind of structure the sales and sales development pairing? What's kind of the ratios and the groups, and how often do they get together? Those sorts of things as we round things out here, Beau.
Sure. As we've got it today at Formstack, it's just under one SDR to two account executives. It's about one SDR to one and a half account executives today.
Okay.
We do keep those vertical focused. So I've got a healthcare sales development rep that's paired with two healthcare account executives, and they're keeping a common strategy with the types of businesses they're prospecting into, whether it's dental agencies or whether it's large health systems, and they're maintaining a specific strategy as a team when they're going after these organizations to stay aligned in messaging and their go-to-markets, which makes that transition in handing over opportunities to the account executive more consistent, because they've had a discussion and they're all on the same page with how they're getting people through that qualified cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And going back to, that the fact that you are the SVP of Sales and Customer Experience, and you mentioned kind of your path in obviously non-SaaS sales and customer experience in a different sort of organization. I think that definitely is infused in your opinion and your perspective on this topic, because you touched on there, this is not only a good thing for overall sales, it's a good thing for the AEs, it's a good thing for sales development, but it is a good thing for the overall customer experience when there is a smoother handoff between SDR and AE that are really facilitated by keeping AE sharp, by making sure that they are at some point touching all the points of the sales cycle. So I really love that aspect to it that just came up in kind of thinking about your experience there.
I love the way you say that, and it is super important. Any handoff of a customer from one point to another is ripe for problems. And by setting up a good system where people understand exactly what the goals of that other role is and what success looks like is not only meaningful to the handoff and making sure that customer success, but from a long-term perspective, it reflects well back onto the organization. I'm a firm believer in this concept of not only does a buyer have to truly understand that your product is a good fit and it's going to solve a good problem, but on a scale of 1 to 10, they've got to be a 10 on your company and the way that you're going to handle them as a customer and the quality of work that you do. And all the things you just said and we're talking about here play into getting that customer to stay and maintain a 10 on that scale of just how you're going to handle them, how you're going to treat a customer through the sales cycle and then on through into customer experience, customer success as they're finding value in your organization. And if you want to have a goal of triple-digit dollar retention within your organization, you can't do it without having all that alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a whole other conversation we could have there on, the effect early on of sales development and sales, their interactions and the trust they build, the experience that they create with new customers on the effect of the overall brand and the customer experience that I think isn't really talked about enough these days. But that's a conversation for another day. We'll have to have you back on. We can riff on that a bit.
I'd love it. Awesome. Sounds great.
Awesome, man. Well, Beau, this has been fantastic again. Thank you so much for joining us for the second go round here on B2B Growth. If anybody listening to this would like to stay connected with you, ask you any follow-up questions, or reach out for any other reason, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Sure. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Beau Brooks. You can email me at beau.brooks@formstack.com as well. Would love to jump into a conversation and talk more about it.
Yep. I highly encourage anybody to do it. Every conversation you and I have had on the sales space and now customer experience as well has been a great one. So thanks again, man.
Likewise. Thanks very much, Logan.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. You know all those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.